Okay, thank you. So yes, just so we can test those little features of Teams, I've put a little quick quiz in for you just to make sure you're awake. So obviously we're running Microsoft Week Wales. So if you're from an organisation outside of Wales, don't worry, you're welcome as well. It's not just for organisations in Wales, but we're going with a bit of a Welsh theme. So just wanted to check the chat window, make sure that was working okay. So if you wouldn't mind just popping in the chat window, those of you that know where this is, and more importantly, why it's in the news this week. Or you can just raise your hand if you know, actually, probably easier. That's cheating, Jamie. I know you know where it is. It's about 5 miles down the road from you. Brilliant. Okay. So we've got a few hands up there. That's brilliant. It is, of course, famous for being the location for I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. Don't ask me any questions on that. You can ask questions around Teams, obviously, not on this one because I haven't seen it. And I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce the name of the castle here. So I'm going to hand over to my esteemed colleague Jamie here to pronounce it for me.
Well, it's pronounced Greich Castle.
Thank you. And it means?
I believe it means hedge, but I can't be sure. So yeah, I don't think it's related.
I think it's hedged castle, isn't it? I think it's his hedged castle. So thank you for that. I wasn't going to embarrass myself by trying to pronounce it. I'll probably have a better go at this one. So yeah, if you wouldn't mind taking your hands down. Another quick one there. So hands up if anybody knows who this bloke is, and more importantly, why he's in the news related to Wales this week. So there's a few of you. Okay. That, of course, is Ryan Reynolds. And as well as famous for being an actor, he's also famous for being one half of the pair that have bought Wrexham FC. Don't ask me why, the background. I'm sure there must be some distant relation there, but obviously there's a lot going on in Wales at the moment. We won't get into politics, but there is a lot going on in Wales at the moment. And as part of that, we're doing our Microsoft Week Wales. So everything Microsoft. And for the first session, I'm pleased to be joined by Clint Conlin, who's the modern workplace specialist in technology for social impact side of Microsoft. I won't steal his thunder. I'll let him introduce himself in a second. I just wanted to very quickly give you a little bit of an overview of who we are. Obviously, some of you are our existing customers, which is great. We've got some people that have not come across us before. So just very, very quickly, we're headquarters in Conway County, North Wales, so we're actually in Llandudno in North Wales, and we've been in business for just over 20 years now, and our focus is around cloud services, primarily helping customers around security, productivity, and what we call agility, so moving services into the cloud with partners like Microsoft and Azure. So we look after about 25,000 end users, across about 1,000 customers, plus we work with about 250 IT partners across the UK primarily. We're also Microsoft Gold partners, it says there at the top, and we work with a number of partners, obviously Microsoft being the biggest one. Probably 80%-ish of what we do is related to Microsoft technology. We also complement that with some other partners. So WaveNet, some of you may have heard of. They are telephony networking company, so they add some of the additional functionality to Teams that we use with customers. So basic calls and lines, but also things like contact center and call recording platform as well. Redstore we've worked with for most of that 20 years in various guises. They provide backup and DR services for traditional servers, but also cloud to cloud. Protos I'll mention very, very quickly because they're running another session with us this afternoon. They are cybersecurity specialist company, so they do a lot of the cyber essentials assessments for ourselves and our customers. So that's a little bit about risk. So in terms of this session, I just wanted to take us back to the beginning of 2020. It seems a hell of a long time ago now, doesn't it? And so much has happened since then. But this was actually a photo I took when I was at Euston Station back in February. Funnily enough, coming back from a meeting with Microsoft, and probably the last time I think that I was in London, but that was February, sort of towards the end of February 2020. And even then I thought, you know, Teams is everywhere I look at the moment. Microsoft were clearly pushing Teams really hard even then. And I remember the adverts. I mean, this one was originally played in the NFL playoffs in January, but we had it played in the UK version was in the Six Nations, I think it was, and also on Sky as well around that same sort of time. So February time. So even then, before the pandemic hit, you know, Teams was had a massive profile from a Microsoft point of view, and I'd like to introduce Clint Conlin now. Seems like a good time to do that. Kirsty, if you wouldn't mind just sharing your screen with us. So
yeah,
we're going to be quite ambitious with today's session. So we're doing a sort of variation on a theme, really. So we're going to try and do a live interview and some slides and a live demo of Teams. Not all at the same time, but if I just stop sharing my, sorry. That should, fine, brilliant. Okay, welcome, Clint. Good morning.
Thank you for having me.
How are you doing? So just to show that we're not just focused on Welsh companies and Welsh people, then Clint's joining us from Glasgow.
Yes, a bit of diversity in the group. So we were talking about the Celtic connection ahead of starting the meeting.
Sounds good. Brilliant. So thanks for joining us for the first session in Microsoft Week Wales. Do you want to just tell me a little bit about yourself and your role in Microsoft?
Yeah, sure. So Clint Conlon, modern workplace specialist. So anything in the Microsoft 365 stack is my area of expertise. Generally, if you think of Microsoft terms, level 100 to 200 across things like security, compliance, Teams, and these have been the hot topics since COVID, struck globally.
Yeah, I mean, it's true that Microsoft do other things other than Teams, don't they? So it just seems to be Teams is the dominant product at the moment, isn't it? Hence why we're starting off with Teams. Brilliant. So, yeah, I mean, 2020 has obviously been a massive year of change for lots of reasons. So thinking back to before sort of COVID hit, so earlier in 2020, and maybe this time last year, what were your Microsoft's focuses around Microsoft 365 and Teams in particular?
Yeah, sure. I always like to start these types of questions with a caveat that I'm not part of the product group, so I wasn't involved in shaping the direction of the products. But it's quite interesting that when I was reflecting on the journey we've been in and over the last year, it's probably worth highlighting that Microsoft Teams actually turned 3 in March 2020. So a lot of people think that Microsoft Teams was brand new this year because of, as you mentioned, that huge marketing push that we've seen. When we think of the roadmap, Microsoft 365, and before it was called Microsoft 365, we were talking Office 365 and enterprise mobility and security and Windows. The goal was always to allow people to be able to work from anywhere on any device securely. And that roadmap and the technologies that were available didn't change an awful lot, but we did see a reprioritization to really, bolster the secure remote working that we needed.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, and then obviously, again thinking back to sort of beginning of March, which again seems a hell of a long time ago. Yeah. Obviously, COVID started to have an impact. Then I remember working with a couple of customers at that time on Teams deployments where we just about managed to get the users trained before they shut the office down and sent them home to work, which from their point of view timing was perfect. So with lots of customers looking to move people out of the office at that time, how did you find that? How was life in Microsoft? Chaotic, I'm assuming.
Chaotic's probably the best word. So at the start, I probably should have mentioned I work exclusively with non-profits and the United Nations in EMEA, so enterprise customers. And same as any commercial organizations, there was a huge scramble to get devices and also to get the expertise and partners that could support the migration to Teams and also the quick wins that you could get from a hybrid estate. So I spent a lot of my time basically just channeling requests from customers to try and find partners who had availability. I liken it sometimes to the stock market. I was putting shouts out who has a consultant for VPN, who has a consultant for Teams, and just trying to pair up the right people at the right time.
Yeah, Matt, I remember, but similar sort of time, mid-March time, one of our customers had to buy, configure, and send out almost 500 laptops because obviously clearly they weren't geared up for home working, and suddenly they had that impact. I mean, some, did it seamlessly. I mean, ourselves, it was fairly straightforward because we were already using Teams, we were already using it from the cloud. So, our help desk guys and girls just went home basically and carried on doing what they're doing. But a lot of organizations had to react really, really quickly. And obviously over the last, thinking from March to where we are now, December. Good grief. Yeah, in December now. We've seen a phenomenal amount of development within teams over that period for obvious reasons since March. So can you talk us through some of the key developments that you've seen over the last 8 or 9 months?
Yeah, I know we were speaking about this offline before we joined, and I did my homework. There has been 185 features added to Microsoft Teams since March.
Oh, thanks for doing that. Yeah, I hadn't got that number, but yeah, thank you. Good grief.
And when you look at these things that came in, it wasn't simply they made it look slightly different or they moved a button. This was, proper transformational product changes that were taking place. Some of the key ones for me, again, selfishly thinking of the non-profit sector, but I'm aware it was used in commercial. There was a tool called Virtual Visits that was released. So Virtual Visits would give our customers and our non-profits, specifically those who were in the healthcare or social care realms, a means to allow, their beneficiaries to be able to select from calendar availability of set staff and then book a Microsoft Teams meeting directly with them without sharing all of the calendar information of the staff. So that's something that was very, very useful and powerful, that was accelerated in terms of prioritization from Microsoft to help meet that need.
I was going to say, was that something that was in the roadmap anyway and brought forward?
Yeah, it was, and it actually brings together something called Microsoft Bookings and Microsoft Teams, and up until that point, Microsoft Bookings was seen much more as a SMB type tool. It's a simple mechanism for allowing scheduling of services, but we've seen that would actually fill that gap of how do we replace face-to-face meetings and help to make it very, very easy to schedule those and access those from any device, which was key.
Yeah, I mean, I will cover some of the ones that obviously have impacted us and, sort of most of our customers. So, obvious ones being meeting enhancements and particularly the video enhancements. Some would cynically say that's to compete with people like Zoom, but I'm not going to go there. But yeah, I think there's
no point shying away from it. Of course it is. I think the one that comes to mind where I was chased on a daily basis was, the 7x7 view, being able to see 49 screens at the same time. And when I first seen the request, I was like, how useful is that? But when you started to speak to people who worked in the likes of the education sectors who were now trying to, maintain a classroom and keep an eye on, who's actually engaged with the sessions, it became apparent how useful that was. Likewise, rhyming off some of the other key areas, things like the backgrounds is fun. I think fun was needed, to kind of get us through some of this. And the ability to then bring together mode where you can see all of the participants in a single screen. The interesting piece around that is it's quite cool, it's quite fun, but there was studies done that showed that it actually helped reduce video call fatigue because you're not constantly looking across all of the individual participants. Yeah,
I mean, that was something that nobody else does. Obviously, I think that was developed for education, wasn't it, to kind of replicate that environment where you're in a lecture theatre or so we'll cover some of that towards the end, and obviously there's I understand there's a limit to what you can share in terms of what the future looks like for the roadmap for Microsoft 365 in general, but obviously Teams specifically. Anything that you think is coming along that we need to be aware of? Yeah,
there's actually a whole host of new features that we're hoping to bring out now in December. So one of the biggest that I'm chased on is something referred to as virtual breakout rooms. So the ability to start a meeting and then have sub meetings where the organizer can then call everyone back from those meetings. So it's a great way for small team ideation and then reporting back into a larger event as well.
Yeah, that's the number one request, or the number one question we get, and when we run these sessions is when will we see breakout rooms?
So I'll cross my fingers. I'm not in product group, but December is what the public roadmap is showing just now. Yeah.
Okay. Brilliant.
A few others. The larger meeting rooms. So we refer to this as an interactive Teams meeting, and there is a limit of 300 participants now, up from 250 a few months back. We are bringing in a capability with an additional add-on to bring that number up to 1,000 interactive participants. And I think we are going to see the lines being blurred between what's referred to as an interactive Teams meeting and Teams live events, which I'm sure you'll touch on in your engagement later on.
Yeah, no, brilliant. Yes, that's 300. I'll cross that bridge when I come to it. But yeah, we've run both interactive and live events. Obviously, remote working's produced lots of additional challenges for organisations, non-profits that you work on, but obviously wider across small and medium-sized businesses. How's Microsoft addressing this challenge?
Yeah, like I say, I think Microsoft, from a technology standpoint, has been geared up over the last probably 2 or 3 years towards allowing that secure remote work from anywhere. But what we've done a really good job of is starting to, make it much easier to find the appropriate documentation and how-to guides to actually take you through how to set this up and how to, get the very best adoption that you can from the products. Of course, old school IT, it used to be your project finish when, the switchover was made. New IT is very much, we need to be making sure that the business is getting as much value as possible from any technical solutions that are put in place. So a few kind of key areas is, there's now a really good remote teamwork guide that's a nice hub for all of the different variants, from IT pro guidance to end user videos for training. We also have something called the Microsoft 365 Adoption Hub. Again, it ties in nicely with user adoption and change management, and again tells you how to build up that successful deployment of Teams, Office 365, OneDrive for Business, SharePoint, you name it. So a lot of effort in there. And probably finally, and most importantly, again, I'm very security focused, is we've created the Zero Trust Deployment Center as well. So this idea that we shouldn't explicitly trust a user just because they've provided credentials. There is a number of factors that need to come into play around the identity, the user's device that they're on, the risk that we may have seen from that user in the past. So the Zero Trust Deployment Center is a great resource for that.
Yeah, I've noticed Microsoft have started to put a lot more functionality in things like Microsoft 365 Business, which is obviously targeted for those sort of organisations, 300 seats and below. But we find a lot of customers have not even deployed half the things that come out of the box with Office 365, like multi-factor authentication being the obvious one. So I think particularly for home workers, as you say, just getting that baseline security. Advanced threat protection is another one. We cover some of that security stuff in one of the sessions this week as well, in a little bit more depth. Tomorrow morning we're running a securing your business environment session as well, because absolutely there are lots of bolt-ons you can bring to security, but there's also a lot of things out of the box that maybe with a bit of configuration work, and again Microsoft are making that configuration work a little bit easier. So I think we've probably covered the other two questions I was going to ask you as we've gone through, but the final one really was sort of any tips for customers looking to deploy Teams for the first time or accelerate the rollout of Teams that they're currently doing.
So I think, touching on what I mentioned earlier, probably the key piece is make sure that user adoption and change management is part of the process, and it really needs that senior stakeholder buy-in and support. So the best Teams deployments that then result in the best adoption, from what I've seen in the non-profit sector, is those that are championed by the senior executives. The time taken to build up at what we refer to at Microsoft as a champions network, but it's those early adopters, and allowing for that feedback loop of what's working and what isn't is so important. Because again, I know many of the people in the call are IT focused, IT pros or IT decision makers. There's not enough bandwidth in IT to be the sole focal point for training people on any solution from Microsoft. So you need to get these people bought into Microsoft Teams and doing the work for you within their departments as well. One other point before we kind of move as well, Mark, I would say, is make sure you utilise these resources. I'm aware that there's so many that sometimes it's a challenge to decide what one to use when, but do make sure that you're aware of what is available to you. And probably the last piece I'd like to finish on is, if we want to move quickly, then we should be utilising experienced partners who have done this numerous times and have the success cases to go with it.
Yeah, brilliant. Of course, I would agree with that, with all of that. But I mean, we use the stat, and I think it probably came from Satya a while back, around the fact that Microsoft saw something like 2 years digital transformation crunched into 2 months or something like that. I mean, that sitting here now, that seems quite reasonable.
Yeah, and we had a kind of customer case study that was released in September for the Royal British Legion. They had an 18-month programme of work planned and ready to go from February. They ended up deploying, I think you touched on it earlier with one of your customers, but 1,500 laptops were deployed. They moved all of the local files into OneDrive and SharePoint with Teams on the front end in the space of 4 weeks. So yeah, there's so many stories like that if you'd said beforehand that someone could even achieve it, you would say no chance, but it can be done. And I guess that's quite a nice lesson that I don't suggest that we try and do every programme of work that would normally take 18 months in 4 weeks, but there is that element that if we take slightly more risks, we can actually meet the end goals for these projects a lot quicker by being agile.
Yeah, I think the overall takeaway is it's just phenomenal how quickly people can adopt. Thinking about the sort of end users of this technology, but also the organisations. And I think things like whether you call it home working or flexible working, however you want to position it, people just seem to have generally embraced it. And I think I've got some slides that talk about some of the impact and what it's meant to organisations. But yeah, it just shows, I guess, when people are given the authority, the trust to work from home, they just get on with it. And I think a lot of organisations have changed their view on home working. I'm guessing Microsoft themselves.
Not as much in Microsoft ourselves, because we have, for the most part, always been geared up to be a remote organisation. Sure. We have 140,000 staff globally, and certainly there will be certain roles that did need to adapt more than others. Myself pretty excluded again, because I regularly, I made the joke earlier, Mark, I do miss my trips down to London every couple of weeks. Yeah. It's a sad day when you miss a red eye to Glasgow to London for 6 a.m. But the face-to-face is necessary. But I think what's probably come out of this across the whole is that people can be trusted to do their work from anywhere if you give them the appropriate tools.
Brilliant. I think that's a perfect note to kind of finish this little section on, Clint. So appreciate your insights and your honesty and joining us. But I think you're okay to hang around for a little bit longer. I think, as I mentioned, we've got a chat window. So if you've got any questions specifically for Clint, then fire away in the chat window and he'll keep an eye on them. And hopefully you'll be able to stay around until the end.
No, I will do.
Appreciate that. Brilliant. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Clint.
Thank you.
So I should be able to take over again. Just bear with me a second. The joys of using 2 screens. Have you released yours, Kirsty, just so
I have.
Yeah, brilliant. Got it. Thank you. Right.
You're welcome.
I'm back. So thanks again, Clint. I mean, just again, recapping on the conversation we just had. I mean, this is a set of news clips I use quite a lot in these sessions, basically going back to the 16th of March, where it first sort of, particularly in Europe, the pandemic hit and people needed to work from home. And as it says there, it's working from home is hardly a new trend, but I think we've certainly seen a mass adoption and impetus for people to work from home. And this question here, will we ever go back to the office? And I think, again, talking to Clint, I think it's for most people, it's a mixture. We've got some people within risk ourselves that are quite happy to work from home, no particular urgency to get back to the office whatsoever. Others that can't wait to get back in and change the scenery and that personal interaction. I think for most people, that kind of 60 to 70% in the middle, then a bit of both is the right answer. And I think having the ability to work from anywhere, from any device, and be as effective is the goal, really. And I think that's what this acceleration has helped. Just a couple of examples. So Fujitsu themselves announced a complete work from home plan back in July for their 80,000 workers. And then just a nod to Microsoft there on the right hand side. So again, thinking back to this time last year, Clint might correct me, I think the number was about 30 million daily active users, which is obviously Microsoft's key measure, now up to 115. And I think it went from something like 20 to 42 million in the space of a month, something like that. There was a massive acceleration in March and April. So I think it's all part of our daily lives now. So I think why Teams? So Clint can shut his ears now. There are other products out there, obviously, that do some of what Teams can do. And, you know, again, our customers ask us, well, we use Zoom. And there's one of the early cabinet meetings. There's Boris on the top left using Zoom. Cisco WebEx. I know a lot of our customers already use Cisco WebEx. It's been around for years. It does that sort of online and the video meetings very, very well. And I think the key difference, despite all the features and functions, and looking at this 7x7 shot of Teams now here, that's great. So, you know, Teams has caught up, and Microsoft have accelerated that technology roadmap to deliver some of this stuff that, you know, Zoom and WebEx can deliver. But more than that, it's the fact that everything's in one place. And it's not just an online meeting tool. It's part of Office 365. It's a collaboration tool. So Zoom's great at what it does. WebEx is great at what it does, but they don't do everything that Teams does. So I think that's the short answer is it's everything's in one place. It's constantly evolving. And again, we talked a little bit about some of the roadmap. I'll cover that in a little bit more detail towards the end. I'm not going to give you death by PowerPoint today. We are going to dip into a demo and just have a quick run through some of the key features of Teams that you may or may not have seen as we go through. But again, just thinking about that point that Teams is a core part of Office 365. So everything you do, all the security you put in place, all of the multi-factor authentication, zero trust around identities, etc. for Office 365 is exactly the same for Teams. It's a core component, so there's not a separate piece of software that you have to think about particularly. So things like advanced threat protection, which we talked about, ATP, applies across email and SharePoint and Teams. And just thinking about, again, questions we get asked by our customers a lot is, well, Teams is surely just another place I need to go to get work done, or it's another application I need to learn, or my people need to learn. Yes and no. I think if I understand Microsoft's kind of end game as well as I do, then Teams will hopefully be the only place that you need to go to get work done at some point in the future. Obviously, at the moment, we've got things like Outlook, which is mail and calendar. Some of that is already in Teams. So obviously, you can see your own calendar in Teams currently. You don't have your inbox there as standard yet. There are ways to get it there, but that will come. SharePoint and OneDrive for Business already sits behind Teams. So Teams doesn't have its own document storage, document management system. It uses SharePoint, it uses OneDrive for Business. And likewise, all of the calling, video, voice, meeting functionality and the chat functionality that was in Skype has been brought into Teams and made much better. So at some point, you can see Teams being a portal to all of the stuff that Microsoft does in 365, but also a lot of the third-party apps, and I'll show you what that looks like. So even things like WebEx and Zoom themselves can be pinned into Teams, so people don't have to leave Teams to get work done, even if they're using third-party apps like WebEx. So what can you do with it? So again, apologies for those of you that are already actively using Teams heavily. You'll have seen all of this before, but you know there are 5 key tasks you can get done. So the new thing that didn't exist before in things like SharePoint and Skype are the ability to create teams, so to manage cross-functional groups and projects very easily. Again, some of this functionality in the background has been there for a while. So obviously SharePoint's been there for a while. Office 365 Groups has been there for a while, but Teams just gives you that ability to manage that much easier and make it more intuitive for users. The chat compared to what you had in Skype for Business is much richer, much more detailed, and I'll show you what that looks like in the demo. Managing documents, again, being able to share and co-author documents has been there for a long time, but the ability to make it easy to use and understand for users is enhanced with Teams. Online meetings, as we're doing now, and also the ability to do live events for those of you who've got enterprise licenses. We'll cover that off as well during the session. Then finally, to make calls. So if you're already using Teams, then you can make Teams to Team calls now, whether that's voice or video. Obviously, the ability to make calls from outside of Teams and vice versa for people to call you on a phone number, that can be done with an add-on called Business Voice. So again, we'll just quickly show you what that looks like for those of you who've not seen it before. The other big question we've got asked, and this was quite an ambitious slide to put together, so thanks to Jamie from marketing for doing this for me, is what tools to use when. And again, this isn't this isn't chapter and verse. You can interpret this how you want, but obviously there are a number of tools within Office 365 that can help you get work done, can help you communicate and collaborate with people, and those that are suitable when you're just having a one-to-one or one-to-a-few conversation versus those that are better if you're trying to communicate organisation-wide. I'll tell you what, I'll share the slide. It might probably make a bit more sense. So, and also looking at the urgency. So how quickly do you want to get a response? How quickly do you need to get hold of somebody? Then all the way through from, editing documents in your own personal OneDrive and then sharing those with a small group of people. Emails are really good one and a really difficult one to give a definitive answer. We've got some customers that have basically dictated internally that people shouldn't use email for internal comms, that they should only use it for external comms, and I think that's probably not a bad ambition to get to. So I think if you can move as much of your communications internally onto Teams, the better, and I'll show you why that is. Obviously chat, one-to-one, one-to-a-few conversations and being able to share documents that way. Likewise, to be able to call and video people with that sort of high urgency, instant communication, being able to see if people are available online, able to take a call, all of that can come through Teams. And as you kind of widen the audience out to more of a small group, a team, and then to the organization, you've got things like SharePoint team sites, which some of you will already have, Planner, which is also a key part of Teams. Office 365 groups I mentioned that sits behind Teams, that actually handles all of the permissions for people that are able to share documents, etc. in that team. And then Teams itself with the channel conversations, which are more informational. So again, people say, when do I post something in a chat with a small group of people? When do I post it in a channel? And I think if you think about chats as being conversational, so trying to arrange a meeting or a quick catch up, whereas if you've got a piece of information that you think might be useful to a wider audience or should be there permanently, so a useful link to a website, then that should probably go in a Teams channel. But again, we'll probably make more sense as we go through the demo. And then online meetings, as we're doing now, so great for a small to medium-sized team of people, fairly quick to set up and easy to set up and run. And then all the way through to those products that are better suited for an organisation-wide communication. Yammer, some of you may use, if you've not heard of it, that's Microsoft's effectively enterprise social product, which is now effectively part of Teams, although it is still a standalone product. All the way through to live events, which I mentioned, which are a bit more structured, one-to-many type broadcast, similar to what we're doing now, but very much a one-to-many, and can scale up to 10,000, I want to say, probably 20,000 end users as well. So lots of different products, but lots of instances where they should be used between one-to-one and organisation-wide. Again, these slides are available after the event, so if that's something useful for you as a reference point, then please use it. Just before we dive into the demo, for those of you again that have not done much with Teams, just a couple of concepts I wanted to get straight before we go in. So a little bit about Teams and channels and how they're organised. So Teams are a collection of people, content and tools. So people being the main one. So that's where you decide, who you want to share information with, who should have access to that information, whether that's a department, whether that's a geography, whether that's a project team. Again, that will depend on your organisation and how you decide to work. And that's very much dependent on how your organisation wants to communicate. Then within each team, you've got a number of channels. You've always got a general channel, which is pinned, and that can't be changed or deleted. And that's a great place to put, general communication for that team. But once you get into specific subjects and conversations, they should go into a channel. And then within each of those channels, you've got a files tab, which is obviously where you can store files that you collaborate on as a team. And they are actually stored in SharePoint. And again, I'll show you what that looks like. And then finally, we've got what we call tabs or connectors, which are external apps to Teams that you can bring in and link to your team. So things like Planner from a Microsoft point of view, things like Yammer, and then also third-party apps like WebEx and Zoom. And then the other concept that's worth getting straight, because it does cause confusion, is what we refer to as a guest user and what we refer to as an external user. So there's a bit of text here, but I will show it in the demo, so it probably make more sense when I demo it. But guest users are effectively people that you invite from outside of your organisation into your organisation, and they become a guest in your Teams tenant. So they don't have to have Teams themselves. They don't even have to have Office 365. They can just be an individual with a Hotmail or a live address that you can invite effectively into your Active Directory, and they can participate as part of that team. As opposed to an external user, which if you're used to things like Skype for Business, it's what was called federation. So that's the ability for you to communicate with somebody outside of your organization directly. So, and see their status and be able to call them using Teams and be able to video chat with them using Teams. So Teams itself supports both, and depending on how you want to work as an organization and how you feel about security and sharing documents outside of your organization, you can switch both of these off across the whole organization. By default, they're on, but again, depends how your view of security, and again, we'll cover some of that off in the demo. So Kirsty, Sean, I'm just going to plow on unless you stop me. So I'll just proceed until apprehended, as they say, if that's okay.
Yeah, Kirsty's just put a little reminder in the chat. If anybody has any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, and Mark and Clint will answer them all at the end with the Q&A as well. So we will be running like a dedicated time to go through anything.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sean. Okay, so this is our sort of demo tenant, for want of a better word. So I just wanted to just quickly go through some of the key features, and then we'll launch into the demo. So this is me, Mark Lawton, Demo at Risk Mail Services. So again, I know there are some people on here who probably haven't used Teams much or at all. You may still be using Skype for Business. A lot of you will have already used Teams. So here, some obvious things. Obviously, it tracks your status, so other people in turn can see by looking at that I'm presenting. So Teams has changed that status automatically, knowing that A, I'm online in a call, and B, I'm sharing slides or sharing my screen rather. So it sets that status to presenting. Obviously, you can override some of those statuses if you don't want to be disturbed, and that's a useful one, particularly if you are using Teams for telephony to stop calls coming through if you're busy on another project. But generally, for most people, that you leave Teams to change that automatically. So if I'm busy in a calendar, it will change my status to in a meeting, because it knows that in the calendar. And externally, if somebody's looking at me from a Teams external chat point of view, they can see that I'm red, amber, or green. They can't see as much detail as somebody internally. We'll go through these settings in a second. I'll come back to that when we talk about calls and video chats. The other thing, which I'm sure you've seen, if not, then you need to use it more, is this search bar at the top. As I've got Microsoft on the call, I call this the Bing of Teams, or the Google of Teams, if you use Google. So this is effectively allows you to search across everything that you've got visibility of within Teams. And this brings me back to the point that thinking about moving your documents, although your documents might currently be stored in a SharePoint site somewhere, if that's not within Teams, then obviously it won't come under this search. But if I just I'll pick on Microsoft actually, well, it's at the front of my mind. So if you type anything into that search bar, it'll tell you every team that I've got, every channel that I've got that mentions the word Microsoft, every meeting that I've been in that mentions Microsoft, and any recent documents. Also, if I press enter here, then it will also pull up any messages in here. Also, you can actually filter that to say, just tell me where I've been mentioned. You can filter it to say just those channel conversations we've had that mention Microsoft. As you see there, it'll pull all of those up, and they go back all the way to, well, day one when we started using this demo tenant, which I think is February. There you go, 12th of February. So unless you have a policy within your organization to to get rid of data after a certain time, it will keep it forever, basically. Chat conversations, so they're obviously the one-to-one and one-to-many chats. We'll cover what a chat looks like in a second, but there's a lot more you can do here actually. So you can do things like, if you want to call somebody, there we go, sorry, /call, and then you can put the person's name in and it'll call them. So it's quite useful for shortcuts as well. So you can do things like, if you want to chat with somebody, if I can actually type today, there you go. So you can say, I want to type to Sean. So you can do quite a lot from that status bar actually. So that's giving you a little bit of navigation. That message will probably fail because this is Sean's not online here, but just to show you what that looks like. So that's a little bit of navigation. So obviously the key tabs on the left hand side here, the first 5 6 are the ones that are obviously always there from a team's point of view, and then there's an option to pin other apps on there, whether they're other Microsoft apps, whether they're third-party apps, and using the 3 dots here you can find another app here. So communities is what Microsoft actually call Yammer within Teams now. It's called Microsoft Communities. So that will then pull up Yammer, and you can access these through the Teams and channels as well. But I'll leave that there and just very quickly show you what the team structure looks like. So we've got a couple of teams, different types of teams here. So if I click on this All Company General tab here, and again, some of you may already do this, and apologies for the size of this text here. You actually see there it says org wide, so that's an organizational wide team, and in terms of looking at best practice, we always recommend that you have at least one of these, and this is a great place for you to have as a broadcast place for information that is relevant to everybody in the organization. So being an all company one, anybody that's added to your internal directory, so into Office 365, anybody new that joins, they automatically get added to this group, to this team, sorry. Likewise, if they leave, they automatically get, so that's automatically synced, and you can have up to 5 of those within your organization, depending on the size, but definitely recommend for you to have at least one. As you see there, it's got a general channel, that's always there, and that's really useful, I say, for general updates for that team. You can also do things like, if I click here, manage channel, you can do things like change the permissions. So again, by default, it allows anybody to post messages in that channel. You can change that to say, actually, I want to keep that clean and tidy and just keep it for broadcasts from the team owners. So if I flick to my other user here, so I've got another demo user here called Andy. You can see there. So he's using the web app, the web browser. If I look on here, go to All Company General. Actually, I've got it pinned to the top. There you go. You'll see that's grayed out. So it's telling me that I can't post messages into that channel. Obviously, I can go to any others. So I can go to Business Strategy, type in a message there. So that shows you what it looks like from a normal team member's point of view. And when I talk about team members, you'll see here, as an organization, you have at least one owner. So obviously these are automatically added in. So let me just pick on this one here, probably make a little bit more sense. Go to the Teams end user training team. There we go. Okay. So again, here, if you look at the top, it just says team. So that's what you'll see most of. So those are general teams where you choose as the owner who you want in that team, so who's allowed to see the information. And it's also telling me something else here. It's telling me I've got 4 guests. So these are 4 people that are outside of your organization. So again, if I go back into managing that team, just to show you what that looks like, just expand that little there. So again, whoever creates the team is automatically the owner, and you can add as many owners as you want internally. Always good practice to have at least one other. Obviously, if I'm away, then you will need somebody to make some changes, add some new members. Then obviously you can't do it. You've only got one owner, so always good to have at least 2 owners. So members are other people in your organization that you want to allow to be part of that team. And then guests clearly are people from outside of your organization. Again, they don't have to have Office 365. They don't have to have Teams. So if you look at this one down here, so this is Lawton12, so that's my Gmail address. So I've signed up using an invite from this team here. So when you add an external guest, just put their email address in, it'll send them an invite out, and then they register, accept the terms and conditions, and then they're in. So the thing to be careful of here, obviously here I can change a member to an owner. I obviously can't change a guest to an owner because they're external. You can control how much, what sort of permissions they have. So if I just go into here, again, these are all defaults. So normally we would recommend that you just leave these as defaults, but you can control what the team members can do, whether they can add new channels or not, whether they can remove channels, etc. But more importantly, their guest permissions. So normally, again, you wouldn't allow guests to create or update channels or delete channels. You just want them to be able to work within a channel and post within a channel. So what I'm actually going to do here is I'm just going to create a new channel and just show you what this looks like. So we'll call it All About Teams for this morning's event. And that's it really. That's all you need to do to create a new channel. You've got a couple of options here. So Standard channel basically inherits all the permissions for the wider team. A private channel, you can actually specify a subset of members. So I'll do both and just very quickly show you what that looks like. So very easy to add a channel, a couple of clicks, and then we've got a brand new empty channel there that we can start talking all about teams. I'll just add another one in as a private one, just so you can see what the difference looks like. About teams. Okay. So here, there's an extra step where it'll ask me who I want to allow access to that channel. So let me pick who I know internally. So I know Bruce is a member of that team, so I want him. I know Louise is a member of that team. So I'm going to add them. And then Mark, who's a guest. Okay, so there's nothing to stop you adding external guests into a private channel either. So there you go. So we've got a little lock against it, which shows you that that's effectively a subset of people. So if we go into that all about teams, just very quickly. So obviously there's a couple of things that you'd normally want to do. So let's start with a brand new conversation. If you click the little format button here with the pen, then you can make it a little bit more structured and compose a message. Call it welcome to Teams session. Useful things to know here. So you can @mention people. So you can either @mention an individual. So pick on Andy, or you can @mention the whole channel. So there it is. So anybody that's in that channel will get a notification, or you can mention the whole team if you want. So the team's called Teams End User Training. There you go. Obviously, you wouldn't normally do all three. You'd either mention a couple of people, or you'd mention the whole channel. Here is the script. So I'm just going to attach a document there. There we go. Okay, so you can browse files that you've already uploaded to existing teams. You can search your OneDrive for Business. If you've got a third-party cloud document storage like Google Drive, you can search for that as well, or you can just upload from your computer. So just so I can show you what that looks like, I will upload it from the computer. Just get to the documents. There we go. Where's the training script? Is there? So there you go. So that's just uploading a Word document straight into that channel called All About Teams. I'm going to press send. So that's done a couple of things. It's obviously sent notifications to all of those groups of people, and it's also uploaded that file into the file section. So there we go. Very straightforward. Without stating the obvious, you don't need to attach a file to a post to get it into Teams. You can just upload it. So the little upload button here, so I can upload a couple more files in. So always good. 100 ways to get healthy and the sales forecast. So upload them into there. And Teams has its own editor for most of the, as you'd expect, Microsoft applications. So in here we can click the three dots there, and I can edit it using the Teams editor. I can edit it using the full Word app if I've got it, or I can edit it using the Word web app. So I've got three options there. So I'll just show you what that looks like in a second. So if I just drop to Andy a second, you'll see he's got his activity feed's got a couple of new things in it. So I'll just have a quick look at that. So it's telling him that I mentioned him there. So you get a notification when you're @mentioned. If you click the filter there, you can filter depending on. So I can see missed calls. I can see if I've got any voicemails left. There's a voicemail there. So you can filter these. Again, it'll keep these notifications, I think, for 2 weeks, depending on how much activity there is. So that's the activity there. If I go into the actual team itself, you'll see that Andy can see those new channels there. So he's got the All About Teams channel in there. So again, Andy can see the documents that I've just uploaded. So they're shared, and as I say, they're actually sitting in SharePoint. So I can actually go into this document here as Andy, edit it in Teams. Just give it a second while it sorts itself out. So there you've got a cut down version of Word basically, but again, you don't really have to leave Teams to get a lot of this work done. So I'm logged in as Andy. If I just go back to my main one here and do the same here as Mark, editing the same document. Again, you'll see a couple of things here. So again, when it catches up with itself, you'll see that same document in the same place. And at the top, you'll see, and again, I'm sure most of you have done this already, stored documents and edited documents collaboratively with other people. So it's telling me somebody else is in there. And again, there's no limit to how many people you can have editing a document at any one time. Also, will tell if I start changes down here. If I flick back to Andy's view, he can obviously see me in that document there. If I click there, it'll tell him where I am in the document. So I can skip forward to wherever Mark's editing the document. There he is. So again, this is really useful, and whether that document's stored in a channel like it is now, as part of a team, or whether that document's stored in a chat, and I'll show you what that looks like in a second. Then obviously that document is collaborative, so it can be edited by whoever's got permission to access it, and that's the important bit. So anybody that's in that channel, whether they're a member or a guest, obviously has access to edit that document. So therein lies the security dilemma. It's always a trade-off between making it accessible and open and making it secure. But Teams handles all of those permissions for you, which is why it's much more intuitive for people to use. The only thing I was going to mention on the Teams files side, so obviously this is the files tab. Obviously you can add other tabs on here if you want. So I can actually, if I want to pin that document to the top, so it's an existing document, it's already in that All About Teams channel. So let's just click that, save it, post it to the top, rename it to something sensible. Sorry. There we go. Okay, and again, you can have as many tabs across the top as you want. Useful for pinning information that's relevant to the day-to-day activity of that channel. So we'll just go back to files, and again, this is the bit where it shows how SharePoint and Teams interact. So these three documents here, sitting in the All About Teams channel under Teams End User Training. If I click open in SharePoint, fingers crossed if the security doesn't let me down.
Sorry, I can't help you. That's on Apple Watch.
Just bear with me a second. It's all right, it's logged me out very sensibly. Okay, there we go. So what you're seeing here is the SharePoint online view of those same three documents. So you'll see what it's done there. So it's created a new directory called All About Teams under Documents, and then those three documents in there, as you can see, that was edited about a minute ago. So you can see it's real time, up to date. The advantage of viewing it through SharePoint is you can effectively go up a level, so you can actually see all of the documents in all of the channels that are stored in that Teams End User Training. So if I click there, you'll see these are all the events that we've run where we don't use this as a demo. So each of them have got their own directory. Obviously this one's All About Teams. So you can either, if you want to sync it locally, again, it's the same three files stored in SharePoint, viewed through Teams or SharePoint or File Manager. So again, you can sync it from here, or you can sync it from Teams. Doesn't really matter. If I click sync there, it'll probably tell me that I'm already syncing it because I've synced it through SharePoint. So let me just go back to that one. There we go. If I click the sync button there, it'll tell me it's getting ready to sync. It's telling me it's going to open OneDrive. And just give it a second to sort itself out in the background. If I now go to the document storage here in Mail Services, there you've got it All About Teams there, created on the 1st of December. Click on that, and then you've got those three documents. Again, you can add files in here and it will sync them back up to Teams. So just to show I'm not making that bit up, let me just pick some nice pictures of North Wales and drop them in. So let's just go back to there. So I'll just paste those files into that directory here locally. There we go. So we've got another 6 pictures in there. If I go back to the SharePoint view, refresh it, again, you'll see that those files, obviously the dates are when they're created, so they're back in April. So, but they're now in that directory. Likewise, Teams. If I click the refresh there into Teams, you'll see when it catches up with itself. There you go. You know, so whether you upload them locally, whether you upload them into Teams or SharePoint, they're in the same place, they're the same documents. So the other, if I click home on here, you'll see that, as I mentioned at the beginning, Teams does a lot of things in the background. So it'll create an Office 365 group that manages all the permissions. It'll create a SharePoint site when you first create a team, and then obviously directories underneath that. But it looks exactly the same as any other SharePoint site, pretty much. So it's telling me I've got 10 members here. I'll click that. You'll see who the members are. Again, you don't have to manage that individually. Teams manages all of that for you. So it just makes the whole experience a lot easier. So conscious of time, I'm just going to whiz or flick over to chat, which is obviously the other big tool that's used day to day by most people. So you'll see it keeps your chat history again back to day one. They call it persistent chat. So yes, it's always there. So again, it also keeps the chat for any Teams meeting that you're part of. So again, if I click there, hopefully there's no messages I don't want to see, but it'll have there you go. So Kirsty's posted just reminder to post any questions on there. So it will track those back, and as you can see, it tracks those meetings back all the way back to day one again. You can start a chat just from here. So just click the little chat window, start typing somebody's name internally, and it will pull back your chat history again. So the conversations that I had between myself and Andy will be there all the way back to day one, unless you choose to delete them, obviously, or your retention policy deletes it for you. I can start multi-way conversation, so I'm going to add Andy into this one. I'm also going to have Bruce in here as well. Have Louise as well with us. Okay, so that starts a three-way conversation. So what it's telling me there is that we've never had a four-way conversation before. So it's basically saying I'm starting a new conversation. So these people are all internal, and I can do a number of things. If you see on the top right, I can start a video call. So if we start off having a chat conversation, say we really need to discuss this, just click the telephone button, it will call them. Likewise, you can share documents, share your screen in the same way that I'll do now in the meeting, and you can also add people into this meeting. With the chat conversations, you can pop them out, so you can have multiple chat conversations running. Again, this is a fairly new feature. So I can pop that one out as well, so you can have multiple conversations happening at the same time. At the moment, you can't do this for calls or video conversations, only for chats. Again, I think that's on the roadmap, but we can look at that towards the end. These are obviously internal conversations. I can upload again here, I can upload a document from my computer. There you go. Let's upload the training scripts into there. I've uploaded it previously, but don't worry about that. But so that's now in the conversation. So Andy and I can work on that document together again if we want. So I can edit in Teams, open it in the desktop, or open it in the browser. But that's actually stored. If I upload the file into that chat, it's stored in my OneDrive for Business under Teams chat files. And obviously Teams handles the permission to allow Andy to also edit that document. So again, whether it's one person, 20 people internally, it's the same process. What is slightly different is if you want to chat with somebody outside, so an external user. So if I drop that down, go to contacts, you'll see I've got some external users here. I'm going to pick on Dom. I'm not going to message him because I'm to death. So Dom's one of our customers. So if I hover over Dom, you can see there that he's from an external organization. It tells me some information about him. So it says he's busy, so I know he's online at least. So he could be in a meeting. If I hover over Andy as an internal person, you'll see there's a bit more information in there. So it tells me you last touched the keyboard 7 minutes ago, but he's away from his desk at the moment. So you get a bit more obviously with an internal contact, but externally, effectively, I can do exactly the same. On the top right, you'll see I've got a video camera, I've got an audio call, I've got document sharing, and I can also pop that conversation out. What I can't do yet, again, that's something else that is on the roadmap, is add anybody else to that conversation. So at the moment, external conversations are one-to-one. So if you want to get around that, the way to do it is to invite them to a Teams meeting, because that can be multi-party. But those chat conversations now are one-to-one, and at the moment I can't upload files and edit them together, because again, that would break the security. But great for just quick message, making contact, phone call over Teams. That works really, really well. Closely related is the calls tab. So similar information here. If you look at chat in my contacts here, I can sort those contacts into different groups. So I've got internal people, I've got customers, I've got favorites, etc. If I go to calls and look at contacts there, it's the same people, but they're effectively a long list of contacts. If you want to structure them in a way that suits you for making phone calls, then you've got the option of the speed dial tab here. So as well as having favorites, customers, internal, etc. in the same order, you can also have this delegates. So I'll cover that in a second, but also speed dial. So these speed dial tabs here, if you use a Teams phone, so if you've got a Teams handset for making calls, then they get replicated across. So you've got one touch to dial these people. So you'll see Andy's one of my delegates. That means he can take calls on my behalf. So I can just literally press the call button there and it will call him. I knew that would cut me off. I was just testing it. So yes, that did cut the call off. Am I back with you, Sean?
You are, yeah.
Oh, thanks, Kirsty. That's all right.
I got a bit nervous when you disappeared. I was like, oh no, what's happened?
Yeah, no, that does happen occasionally when I try and be too ambitious. Let me just share that one again. Yeah, so obviously you can't have multiple calls at the same time through the Teams app, only through the web app. But there we go. So I won't do that again. Yeah, so you can obviously click one click to call these people. You got another couple of tabs on here, so it shows you any voicemails that you've had. So there you go. There's a voicemail history there. If you actually click it, it'll give you a transcription of it, or the best effort it can do as a transcription. Actually, that looks pretty good. I think it probably gets better over time. If I look at some of the previous ones, they weren't very accurate. It also sends you that voicemail as an attachment to email as well. And you can't switch that off, but obviously you can play that back. Again, I won't do that now, but obviously transcribes the voicemail and keeps that in there. Also keeps all of your call history. So you'll see outbound, incoming, calls you've answered, calls you've missed, call duration, some of the basic functionality here. If I go into my settings tab here, you can actually configure that. So by default, if somebody calls me, it rings, stating the obvious. You can also get it to ring. Let's say if you want it to simultaneously ring your mobile, if you've got business voice, you can get it to ring your delegates. If you've got delegated authority, and likewise call groups, you can set call groups up. So if you want missed calls to go somewhere else, you can do that. Generally, it'll go to voicemail after 20 seconds. That's the default behavior. So you can do things like configure your voicemail, set your own message, all the things that you'd expect from a phone system. Devices, again, you probably know this. By default, you can change your video camera settings, your default handset. You can make a test call. This is new, noise suppression, so it will hopefully cut down any low-level background noise that you get in these conferences. That's a fairly new feature Microsoft have introduced in the last month or so. So that's the voice side. You'll see here, for those of you that don't have business voice, which I'm assuming is the majority of you, you'll see there I've actually got a phone number. So that's business voice. So obviously people can call me from outside of Teams, or they can still call me Teams to Teams. So let me just show you what that looks like very quickly, and show you what a Teams to Teams call looks like coming in. I won't answer it, and then what a normal phone call looks like coming in. So what I'm going to do actually, because this has got me set to do not disturb here because I'm presenting, it will actually put the call straight through to voicemail. So I'm going to flick to Andy's view here, go back to Teams here. There we go. So I'm actually going to call Andy so you can see that. So Andy's using the web browser. There we go. Okay, so you'll see it's popped up there, and I can do a number of things. So I can answer the call with a video or answer the call with a phone. So you know that is a Teams to Teams call because it gives the option of using video. If I just call Andy directly on his DDI number, which is, there's his DDI number there. So now you can see the only option I've got is to answer the call or reject the call. So it tells you what phone number's calling you. And again, if that number's in your contacts, then it'll pop the name up of whoever's calling you. So there are a number of things you can do with that call. I am going to answer it. Wasn't quick enough. Try again. I'll just very much sure. Obviously, this is Andy, not me, so it won't cut me off. I just need to make sure I mute the sound on both ends. So that's what a normal phone call looks like. I can add other people to the conversation and make it a 3, 4, 5-way conversation, either somebody internally or another phone number. So to make it a 3-way, 4-way call. I can also transfer the call. Again, I'm not going to do that now, but you can either blind transfer it to somebody else, or you can consult and transfer. So that will actually bring up a chat window. So you can actually have a conversation with somebody first. So are you okay to take this call? And then there you go, and the call gets put through. So lots of, I mean, that's a real sort of high level look at the calling functionality. I mean, we can do a lot, and we are running a separate session on unified comms, which is tomorrow afternoon, which will go into a lot more detail about how, what, and where you do this and how you roll Teams voice out. So that's very briefly shown.
Just drop the link to that in the chat as well if anybody's interested in that. Again, yeah, Mark will be covering that in more depth. So there's a link to sign up for that session in the chat.
Brilliant. Cheers, Sean. And then just finally, the calendar. Again, obviously we're in this meeting now. So again, the calendar that you see in Teams is exactly the same as the calendar that you see in Outlook. So if I just drag the Outlook one across, you'll see there, that's my view in Outlook. So the big difference in Outlook is you have to tell it it's a Teams meeting. It obviously doesn't set every meeting up. So you can either create the meeting, then make it a Teams meeting. You can click New Teams Meeting here, and it will pre-populate it for you. Let me just pick the right Bruce. There we go. Call it test 1 so we know which one it is. At 12 o'clock. Obviously it pre-populates all of the Teams meeting details, the link and the dial-in number. If you've got audio conferencing, send that. Obviously puts it into Outlook, and we'll put it into Teams as soon as it syncs itself up. Sometimes takes a few minutes. There you go. So that's in there. If you create the meeting in Teams, obviously every meeting that you create in Teams has already got the details in. So test 2. Let's put Bruce into that meeting, make it later on today. There's a couple of things that you can do that you can't do in Outlook. One is to post it directly into a channel. So this is quite useful if you've got, say, an all-company call or a call that you want to distribute out to a wide audience, but don't necessarily want to have to sit there typing in all the names of the people. You can just post it into a channel and say, here's the meeting. So let's post it into the channel that we just created. All about Teams. There we go. Put it in the, won't bother. There we go. So again, send that. Okay, so it's created the meeting called test 2. If I go back to Outlook again, you'll see it's popped it in there. If I go back to the channel, so have a quick look at Andy's view of the team there, you'll see that meeting now appears in the channel here to say, here's a meeting. Click the 3 dots there, you can view the meeting details, and then add it to your calendar. So that's a really useful way of posting a meeting into a complete team. So the calendars are pretty well integrated. Again, there are some things you can't do in the Teams calendar that you can do in Outlook, like see people's availability. So the scheduler doesn't work as well in Teams, but yes, but they are synced together. So I think that's probably covered everything I wanted to cover in terms of the demo. As I mentioned, it's very easy to pin these third-party apps down here on the left-hand side, although Planner is obviously a Microsoft app. It's not pinned there by default. So that takes you to the Planner app. You can see some of these tasks that have been assigned to me. If I go back into the team conversation, you see I can actually, if I go into the conversation there, you'll see along here, all of these icons are reflected. So I've got Zoom, So I can interact with Zoom or create a Zoom meeting, create a form, Survey Monkey. So lots of different options to configure and customize these teams and channels once you're sort of inside. So I think that's it from the demo point of view. Let me just stop sharing that, go back to the slides, and we'll wrap up. So just a second. Need to find my slide. There it is. Thank you. Okay, so that was a quick rattle through demo through the Teams demo. As I mentioned in the beginning, then we try and cover sort of 80% of what you need to know in probably 20% of the time we'd normally take to do a complete sort of end-to-end Teams training session. So it's real sort of rapid fire through. So apologies for the speed of going through it. As I say, Sean will make the recording and the content available after the event for you. Obviously, you can come back to us if there's any other questions after the event, and we'll pause for Q&A once I've gone through these final few. So there's a few summary slides here. So who can I collaborate with? So this is a really useful summary of who can communicate with who. So internal users, whether they're team owners or members, whether they're external guests, whether they're guest users or external users, and basically anyone. So as I mentioned in the opening piece, anyone can join a Teams meeting. They don't have to have Teams. They don't have to have the Teams app. They can join through a web browser. As always, the experience is better using the Teams app. But if you've got consumer users or small businesses that maybe don't have Teams and don't want to install the app, then they can join this meeting just through a web browser and get pretty much the same functionality. This is Microsoft produced these really useful little videos actually, so I'm going to use this rather than trying to demonstrate making and receiving a call. So I'll just let that sort of go through again. So this basically shows you how a call comes in, how you answer the call, how you can have a chat conversation with somebody else in the organization, and then push that call through. So there are a number of these that sort of demonstrate how the calling functionality works. So you can, once you've got hold of the person, you can blind transfer, you can transfer a call straight to voicemail. There you go. So as it says at the top, transferring to Adele, and that's it. So that's really easy to make and receive calls using Teams. So just to sort of emphasize what I went through on the demo in terms of where those files sit. So that's a Teams view of the files that sit within Microsoft Week Wales team. As you see, there's a couple of buttons that we pulled out there. One is to sync it locally, and the second one is to open it in SharePoint. If you click there, have a look what it looks like in SharePoint. They're exactly the same files and directories, but with a SharePoint view. And if you look very closely, the URL at the top says sharepoint.com/sites. So all of the teams that you set up are under SharePoint under a directory called sites. So you'll see that sort of constant theme as you start rolling teams out. And then obviously locally, sync locally, same file, same directories, but in a OneDrive view. Same with chats and meetings. Again, that file, if you upload the file, it's stored locally in your OneDrive for Business, but the permissions are modified so that the other people in the call can actually view it and edit it. And again, that's where they're stored. So if you go into files and look in Teams, Microsoft Teams chat files, you'll see the files that you've uploaded into chats are there. And again, the permissions are set by Teams. You don't have to worry about doing that. But again, that's internal only. You can't use Teams to share those externally yet. Microsoft has spent a lot of time, compared to what it looked like with Skype for Business and some of the other products, they've spent a lot of time making sure that the cross-platform experience is consistent. So whether it's Windows, whether it's Mac, whether it's a web browser. So if that's what Teams looks like from a Windows point of view. This is exactly the same team look through a web browser. Virtually no difference, and virtually no difference in functionality either. So actually, again, although the experience is better by downloading Teams, web browser can give you 99% of what the full-blown app can give you on a PC or on a Mac. Obviously, things like the iPad app work slightly different given the layout of the iPad, but again, really effective. And I think pretty much all the functionality that's in the Windows app you can replicate now on an iPhone and iPad, even things like blur in the background, which you couldn't do before. So the experience is pretty consistent across all of these platforms. The mobile app is great. I know I showed you how you could potentially simultaneously ring your mobile for a call coming in. Generally, we advise people not to do that. We advise people to install the Teams app, use the Teams app, and answer calls on the phone because it works so well. Couple of tips on the Teams app though. Obviously, you can use things like one click to join if you've been invited to a meeting, which is great. Also, it's got this notifications setting in the app, which has something called quiet hours. So again, I would make sure you use that. Then that basically suppresses any notifications out of working hours. That's quite a useful tip if you are using the mobile app. You'll also see there underneath my orgs, you can see that I'm a guest in a number of organizations. So obviously I can use the Teams app either on the phone or on the desktop to flick between those. So if I wanted to join the Bridge organization as a guest, I just click that. I've already enrolled and already signed up. So literally it just logs me out of my direct Teams access and in as a guest to Bridge, likewise Microsoft. That's quite a good place to see that happening. In terms of guest user experience, as I mentioned, you can invite people and they'll get an email just basically saying you've been invited to the Risk Teams demo team, as it says here. They get a nice little email. Click on the link. The first time that they sign up to that organization, Risk Mile Services, then they have to accept the T's and C's. Once they've done that, they're in. So that just shows a screenshot of joining through a web browser as an external user, or a guest, sorry, get my terminology right, as a guest. Likewise, as I mentioned, you invite anybody to a Teams meeting and you'll get an invite like this. Click on the link and then you joined without downloading the Teams app. What you'll generally get if you're using Edge and you click a meeting join and you haven't got it set to automatically use the Teams app, then you'll get this little pop-up, which is quite useful actually. So it'll tell you, do you want to continue on this browser or download the Teams app? So that's only with Edge, I think, at the moment. So that's just a nice, cleaner experience for people. Devices, again, we're not going to spend too much time talking about telephony devices. So we've got a session tomorrow afternoon around unifying comms when we'll go into this stuff in a lot more detail. But again, there's a huge ecosystem of devices out there that will work with Teams, whether you're using it just for Teams to Teams calls or whether you want to use it for full-blown telephony, as I've shown you in the demo. Then effectively looking at that Yay-Link phone is what we use. That there are other manufacturers as well, but that's effectively running a Teams Android app on a phone. So if you've got users that want to carry on using handsets, they can be accommodated. To be honest, most of our customers that have moved from traditional telephony to Teams have dumped the handsets and gone with headsets for most people, especially as they're now working at home. So, and on the move and in the office, it just obviously gives you that flexibility to move wherever you want, as long as you've got a device that can connect. These on the right hand side, that's a Teams meeting room system with the slate and the high definition camera. Again, they're really easily integrated into Teams. Has really clever functionality where you can walk into a Teams room to join a meeting. It says, oh, by the way, there's a room system here. Do you want to use that instead? So proximity join. So there's some really, really nice features, and we've got lots of customers using sort of all of this kit. Okay, I'm going to take a breath there. So that's a rattle through, as I say, hopefully 80% of Teams, what it does, what it is, when to use it. Just wanted to finish off on some of these futures piece here. And again, this is all stuff that's in the public domain, so Clint won't tell me off for divulging anything I shouldn't be. But and again, this is obviously a slide that I've stolen from Microsoft. So this, I don't know if there are 185 on here, Clint, but it gives you an idea of some of the enhancements that have happened over the last, I think, 8 months. These are pretty much around Teams in particular. So there's a heck of a lot of stuff in there. And then in terms of the meeting enhancement, so this is the together view that Clint mentioned in the opening bit. So this has been designed to sort of replicate that lecture theatre type environment. And as you say, Clint, some of the studies have said that this is much easier on people in terms of being able to interact with lots of people at the same time, much easier than that 7x7 video feed. That's called together view. And then the large gallery view is the one that I showed at the beginning. So that's really, I guess, leapfrogging what Zoom can do. So that's sort of two views of, again, the same people, depending on your preference. As I say, this left-hand one's been pushed out primarily in education. And then this is a slide I used in March originally, which didn't have any of these lines through it. These were all things that were coming in the future. So obviously the ones that are crossed out are things that are already being delivered there. So there are some bits that we're waiting for. So offline support is a key one. That's still limited. So you really need to be connected and online to be using Teams. The new task experience, so having that fully integrated, that's rolling out at the moment. So having all of your tasks, whether they're from Planner, from Outlook, from other applications, all pulled together into a single task management platform. And then obviously, as I mentioned, pop-outs at the moment are only for chat messages, not for calls or meetings. So again, that is coming on the roadmap, and that roadmap we mentioned is available there. I need to check that link. That link may not take you directly to the Teams filter, but if you click the product filter on the left-hand side and click the Teams box, it'll just filter the updates. As you can see, there's this was this morning actually, so I thought I'd update it. So actually there's 129 features in development and 26 currently rolling out. So there's still a hell of a lot in the pipeline. I mean, some of them are geography specific. So obviously, US government, for example, have specific features, but generally these are, let's say, new file sharing experience, just to make that ability to share files externally a little bit slicker in Teams. Meeting recording for areas where Stream is not available. So at the moment, this meeting recording is actually stored in Stream, which is part of Office 365. Stream isn't available in all locations around the world. So Microsoft are moving that to SharePoint, so you can actually store the meeting recordings directly onto SharePoint instead, which would be quite useful as well. So that roadmap's available. There is something else called User Voice as well. Again, we'll send you the link to that, which is kind of pre-roadmap, if that makes sense. So people post features that they'd like to see in Teams, and then effectively they get voted up. And when they hit a certain level, Microsoft will take them on board and take a look at them and whether they're feasible or not. So that's called User Voice. I'm sure you've seen it for other products as well. That's a really useful place to go for things that might be coming down the pipe later on. So just final slide here, just to summarize, I think what Teams does deliver. And I think it's all about that single place being part of Office 365, everything that you apply to 365, securing your identity of your people is all rippled through to Teams, whether you're logging in from a PC, from a phone, from an iPad or not. And that ability to collaborate internally and, more importantly, externally, so the ability to add people from outside of your organization into those channels, share conversations, share documents, share calls and videos with them. And as I mentioned, I'm sure at some point in the future, whether it's 12 months, 2 years, 3 years, then Outlook will kind of fade out and everything will be delivered through Teams at some point in the future. So that single platform for delivering everything that you need to get work done. Online meetings and live events. Again, we don't cover live events in this session, but we'll cover it in one of the other sessions. So if that's something you are interested in, that ability to broadcast meetings to more than 300 people, but also have that more curated Q&A type environment rather than what we call, as Clint mentioned, this is an interactive meeting where we can have conversations and talk to each other. The mobile app experience is, well, second to none. I mean, both compared to the previous version with Skype for Business, but also compared to anything else that we've seen out there from third party, particularly the telephony vendors. And then the ability to build onto Teams with things like full telephony, full contact center, compliance call recording. So if you've got a compliance requirement, whether that's financial services, law, then we can offer compliance-based call recording as well. So obviously what we're doing here is recording this meeting, but that has to be initiated manually, and then that's stored currently in Stream, soon to be in SharePoint. With external call recording platforms, you can basically record every conversation, internal or external, Teams to Teams or Teams to telephony, and have that stored for up to 7 years. So that's slightly different. It's automatic call recording and it's an add-on. But yeah, so Teams is a platform which you can do a hell of a lot with. I think is probably the summary from my point of view. And just finally, a shout out to some of the other events. So this is the first one. So thank you for joining it. Thank you for staying with us. We've got 5 other events running. We've got another one running this afternoon, which is a deeper dive into both the Microsoft 365 security out of the box, but also some of the third-party security apps. And I'm joined by Darren Cooley from Protoss Networks for that one. Tomorrow, if you're interested in going into a bit more detail around some of the security tools and configuring them, and using Secure Score, which is part of Office 365, to look at your security assessment. Then we've got a workshop running with Bruce Lang, who's our head of tech, tomorrow. And then in the afternoon, we've got a unifying comms session with myself and Mike from WaveNet around the whole call recording, contact center, telephony piece. Thursday, we've got an Azure session in the morning, which is all around how to optimize your spend and manage your spend in Azure. That's quite a hands-on, detailed session. And then finally, on Thursday afternoon, we've got deploying teams best practice. So that'll touch on some of the things I've talked about this morning, but it's more around, okay, what teams do I need? What should they look like? You know, how do we best deploy them? How do we secure it? So that's the deploying teams best practice event. Then I think, Sean, we've also got a prize, haven't we? Prize draw at some point. You take yourself off mute.
Sorry, my microphone was muted as well, as well as the mute on the thing.
Unmute twice. Yes.
Yeah,
Sean, do you want to just cover that bit for me?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, everybody today will receive a post-event or access to the post-event hub over email, and that includes a session recording, a load of extra supporting collateral as well around Teams and everything to do with Microsoft. And there will be a form at the bottom where you can enter the prize draw for the Surface Go 2. It is the Surface Go 2, isn't it, Mark? And everybody.
The latest one is.
Yeah, the latest Surface Go. And yeah, everybody has one entrance per the entire competition. Full terms and conditions are on the form as well. So look out for that email to the post event hub, and yeah, you'll be able to enter there.
And nobody from Risk is allowed to enter that, or Microsoft, Clint, just before you put your hand up.
Come on.
Sorry, no, you're excluded. So hopefully that was useful, everyone. Sean, do you mind just stopping the recording? Because I'm on my demo user, it won't let me do it.
Yeah, sure thing.
Thank you.